organizations are adopting agents faster than they can secure them.
The biggest mistake that I see people doing is they're using security in the AI era still the way they used to do in the previous era.
I believe that this is the most dangerous aspect where humans rely on agents and overtrust agents, and the agent can influence human decisions in real life.
Memory and context poisoning is definitely causing problems, not immediately, but down the line.
It's very sneaky. It's one of those attacks that doesn't happen with a big bang. I believe that organizations should strictly control what agents are allowed to remember. Only high confidence and validated data should be written in long-term memory, period.
Eva Benn is the Principal Security Program Manager at Microsoft. She spent most of her security career in red teaming and penetration testing. She is an international keynote speaker, cybersecurity educator, philosophy junkie, and a seasoned cybersecurity professional. She is a recognized voice in cybersecurity who has earned several global awards and is deeply involved in the security community in many ways, including contributing to the OWASP for LLM projects. Sumeet is a results-oriented cloud security specialist with 10 plus years of experience delivering secure, scalable cloud architectures across global enterprises. He's a senior solutions architect at Google, where he leads secure cloud and AI LLM infrastructure transformations. In this exclusive interview with AI Cyber Magazine, we'll discuss the OWASP Agentic AI Top 10 that has been released and their importance while exploring unique risks like rogue agents, memory poisoning, and cross-agent trust. We will also discuss the need for organizations to adapt their insider threat models and prepare for evolving AI security challenges.
What are the top 3 risks that you want to go after in 2026 and really just go at them?
Eva and Sumeet, welcome to AI Cyber Magazine.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Confidence.
It's my absolute pleasure. So let's get started. I know that, the previous OWASP Top 10 focused on LLM security. I'm curious, did a shift happen that really necessitated a separate top 10 for agentic applications?
I guess I'll start. Yes, absolutely. A clear shift happened. The original LLM top 10 was designed for applications where AI primarily generated text outputs in response to user prompts. In these systems, security risk was largely confined to the user interaction layer, focusing on how inputs influenced model responses rather than a downstream action or system behavior. Now, with agentic applications, the security model has changed entirely. Agents don't just respond to our prompts and questions, they decide, they remember, they act. They break problems into steps, select tools, delegate tasks, and execute across real systems. And that moves AI risk from a content problem into a systems and operations problem. So it's a major shift. So I'm glad you started with this question. Once the agent has autonomy, every design choice becomes a security boundary. And I believe that there are 3 main attributes that are fundamentally driving that shift. And that's that with agent, we now have systems that have autonomy, that have memory that influence their decisions, and they can manipulate a large set of tools and orchestration. What do you think, Sumit?
100% alignment with you, Eva. Just to continue your last point there, the way I like to see it and the way I refer to is ATM, right? Autonomy, tool use, and memory. Like autonomy meaning, they can make their own decisions and act on your behalf without you even knowing that, oh, you keep on thinking, did I even authorize this? So that's the risk that we are facing. Obviously, with the whole agentic workflow, we have so many third party tools in picture, we have so many APIs and so on and so forth that are part of the overall workflow that increases the overall blast radius as well, right? I mean, one thing goes wrong and that could lead to failures across the whole stack. And with memory, because agents have those long term memory, if you poison those memory or if you corrupt those memory, then it's going to be hard to recover from as an organization. So there's been a paradigm shift, like Eva said, and it was really necessary and important to think and act in that way and come up with top 10, which was specific to agentic AI.
This is such an important question. I don't think we address them why now, right? I think it's because organizations are adopting agents faster than they can secure them. And in many cases, they're flying the plane while building it. And this is literally their playbook and the one key resource to help them innovate safely.
Awesome. And I like the framework that Sumit has brought. And it just makes me laugh. Okay, so ATM is no longer automated teller machine in our heads. It's now autonomy, tool use, and memory. Okay, great one. So fantastic. Something that's easy to remember. We're going to keep that in our memory. But I also want us to just run down the OWASP top 10. It's just been newly released. People may not know what they mean, what's number one, what's two, what's three. We're going to run down each of them and what they mean. So people watching this show that have never gotten to read, which I actually encourage you guys, go read it on OWASP website, right? I'm going to put in the show notes. But before they do that, let's give them some short recap of what those top 10s are. If I take the floor.
Absolutely. And just want to reiterate what Confidence just said. You need to download it and study that thing. We're going to go over these high level threats and mitigations right now, but it's very important that this is not a one time read for you, but it's something you keep printed next to you on your desk. So, the first risk is agent goal hijack. So, the AI agents are designed to autonomously plan and execute sequences of tasks in order to achieve a defined objective, right? Sounds very reasonable. Because they rely heavily on natural language instructions and unstructured context, agents and their underlying models cannot reliably distinguish between authoritative instructions and surrounding content. And that is what creates that systemic weakness. Attackers can influence the agent's goals, task selections, and decision paths through various ways, right? Through manipulation of the prompts, through deceptive tool responses, through poisoning external data, through malicious artifacts, etc., etc. And unlike the LLM focused risks that used to impact like single model output, this risk here can address a broad failure, systemic failure, because manipulated inputs that redirect objectives and planning and multi step execution can truly be catastrophic and trickle down the entire system. One key mitigation I'll give you, there's a whole list in the document, is to treat all natural language inputs as untrusted.
Interesting. Submit it number 2 then.
Yeah, I can take the next one. The next one is tool misuse and exploitation. And just want to call it out. The tools that we are referring to in this particular top 10 is the authorized tools that we have, right? In your workflow, if you have a particular tool that you're using, that your agent is calling, aiding with some particular action, if that particular tool is being tampered with to do something which is deviated from the original goal, that's what we're talking about here, right? Agents are using or misusing rather legitimate tools, and some of the ways that they do it is by using prompt manipulation or privilege control, which results into things like data exfiltration, right? So it's important to remember for this particular thing, we're talking about the authorized tool that were always supposed to be there in your workflow, but attackers or adversaries are trying to manipulate it so that the tools are being misused by the agent.
Awesome. Okay, so Eva, do you want to take number 3?
Absolutely. Number three on the list is over-permissioned agents or privilege abuse. This is very similar, like a classic privilege escalation. The core issue is still that access is expanding beyond the intended scope, right? Now, with users, privilege escalation usually exploits a clear identity, clear role, or permission misconfiguration. With agents, the complexity is that identity is fluid and implicit. Agent inherit trust dynamically through delegation chains, shared context, cached credentials, and agent to agent interactions. The who is acting becomes a little bit ambiguous and can be hard to manage. So in practice, this creates attribution gap, and an agent may act using a mix of its own persona, a user's delegated permission, another agent's credentials, etc. So a quick mitigation tip here is to enforce task scope, time-bound permissions, and obviously always use principles of least privilege.
I really like that term, attribution gap. Can you give us maybe more context to why there is attribution gap? I'll give you something to work with. My understanding is that attribution gap really the term to address the problem where a human does something and you can say this is the person who did this, right? As it has to do with the fundamental principle in cybersecurity, right? But when an agent does it, an agent typically is assigned his own identity sometimes, but it could morph its identity. Could that be what attribution gap is? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think that there could be many ways here that we can look at this problem. If you look at the workflow, let's just say for financial transaction approvals, there may be a human in the loop that the agent is assisting, like with approving that transaction. Maybe the agent is inheriting permissions from the user and approving a transaction that was auto approved by a human in the loop. They're making, let's just say, the approval, right? So at that point, who is the responsible party? Is it the agent? Is it the user? Was it an inherited permission down the chain? Like we're talking about complex workflows in many cases that were never designed for the autonomous behavior here. So I think that when we think about agents, we need to treat them as their own identities and ensure that there is always attribution to whatever action they're taking. And that attribution is traceable all the way up the chain.
So who or what is right? Yeah. So do you want to take number 4 then? Go ahead.
Yep. I can take number 4. So ASI04 is, agentic supply chain vulnerabilities. When you look at the whole ecosystem where agents operate, there are, several things, including, third-party tools. There could be external models that you're using. There could be MCP servers, which could be either your own MCP servers or third-party MCP servers that you're using. Overall, supply chain consists of several different moving parts, right? With ASI04, what it tells that, if there are different components. If one of those is compromised, then there is a problem, right? For example, if you're using a third-party MCP plugin and that is compromised, then it's a problem for the overall workflow itself, right? Some of the ways it can be done is by poisoned or impersonated tools that you're using in your supply chain itself. Now, it is important to remember that we spoke about tools in my previous ASI O2, where I spoke about tools misuse. Here, we are talking about not authorized tool. We are talking about malicious third-party tools which are being used in the overall setup, right? There are some dynamically loaded prompts or models or third-party MCP servers that you're using and so on and so forth. So like there are, seven moving parts, and thus it becomes very important to keep an eye on each and every component of it to make sure that, the third-party tools that our agents are calling are actually the ones that we want them to call. As number 4, which is the agentic supply chain vulnerabilities.
I mean, that's a very interesting vulnerability. I'm going to come back to it at some point in this chat. But Eva, go ahead and have us and share what number 5 is.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about supply chain, I also just want to pull a plug. OWASP actually has an AI bill of materials, like AI bomb project, that essentially is giving you a framework and tools. It's there is a repo there with resources for you to manage your supply chain. Just think of it as the S bomb but for AI. So I just wanted to plug that in, and I'll make sure that you have the link also.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. So you can always check out the show notes and you'll find it there.
It's certainly, yeah, I really love Sumi's description. It's the sneakiest one of all. The supply chain gives the give that keeps on giving. Diving back into number 5, which is unexpected code execution. At its core, this is similar to our vanilla RCE. Attackers turn input into executable behavior, leading to code execution, system compromise, persistence, or sandbox escape. Now, in a agentic system, what's different is that the code is often generated and executed dynamically by the agent itself. So the popular agent-based and vibe coding tools write code in real time, invoke scripts, deserialize objects, and load modules as part of a normal operation. And because this execution is expected behavior, it can bypass traditional security controls that look for known binaries and static code paths.
That's an interesting one. And I like that you really tied it to RCEs. That's what we're used to. That's what we traditionally know, right? And this is a new flavor of it, right? With agents in the mix. So it's scary to hear. And I'm going to come back to ask a lot of questions about that in terms of defenses. Sumit, go ahead and give us number 1.
Number six. Number six, I think, is memory and context poisoning or memory and context injection. At the very beginning, we spoke about ATM. That means memory is a very core component of how the whole system works, right? Now, imagine if you are corrupting that memory or the overall context in which the agent operates, then that could have catastrophic, results overall. So with memory and context injection, the way it works is, adversaries or attackers are trying to poison things like your, RAID databases or, the long-term memory that you have, however you are managing it, or, the context windows that you have. And what adversaries are doing is they are planting false knowledge or information within that memory slowly and steadily so that it's hard to detect that it's actually happening. But when it happens, you could see there was, for example, maybe bias in the results that come out of the agent's action. And once it is at that stage, it's really hard to recover from there because, the whole memory is already corrupted. You cannot go back and start from scratch now because it takes significant effort. So if you are a victim of memory and context poisoning, then you are in deep, deep trouble. So a really important one in my opinion.
Completely agree.
Eva, do you want to take number 7?
Absolutely. Number seven is insecure communication channels. And the risk here is similar to our traditional service to service communication failures, but agentic systems raise the stakes. So it gets a little bit spicier. The underlying issue is basically the same, right? Exchange message. The messages are exchanged without underlying authentication, integrity, or authorization, and attackers can intercept, spoof, or replay or alter communication, right? It's the same premise of what we all know. Now, in agentic systems, communication is continuous, autonomous, and meaning driven, and agents coordinate through APIs, message buses, shared memory, and discovering mechanisms, often with different levels of autonomy and trust. And the traditional perimeter defenses break down because there's no clear inside or outside. And that's what makes it more complex. This risk allows attackers not just to tamper with messages, but manipulate intent and behavior. So that's where it gets spicier. This includes semantic attacks where messages are technically valid but strategically misleading, as well as side channels where agents leak or infer sensitive information through timing, sequencing, or behavioral patterns. It's a lot more complex than our just good old vanilla men in the middle.
There's a lot to unpack there. A whole lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Number 8, Sumit, let's go.
Yeah, number eight is cascading failures, like the name suggests, right? I mean, if you look at fundamentally how agentic systems are built, previously we used to have, single agents, but now it has evolved to multi-agent systems. If there is an issue or a failure at a single point, then it'll cascade throughout the chain from there on. And that means that if there is a malicious event, it would propagate. Think of it like a domino effect, where if one domino falls, then every domino going forward falls because of it. So that's really important. It is important to check at different checkpoints of your system so that it's not cascading forward.
And I think that this cascading effect is actually crazier when you think about the fact that most solutions are multi-agent systems, and there's sort of like a marathon-like handover of the baton as commands are executed. So I can already see that domino effects play out there. So we're going to come back to that particular vulnerability. Eva, take number 9, please.
Just, I want to say, I love the domino effect. That's such a good analogy. So, number nine, I'm actually so lucky that I got to speak to this one because that's my favorite. Human agent misalignment. That's the name. And this is essentially what I like to call social engineering, but not human to human, but agent to human. I talk so much about how AI nowadays has the capability to interact with us as human in a way that elicit our cognitive biases. And so agent can sound very confident, very empathetic, very authoritative, which increases the likelihood of humans blindly.
It'll make us feel so liked and so important.
Exactly. So actually there's specific psychological biases that are being engaged here, but I will contain myself and will focus essentially when agents are autonomous and embedded in workflows. This over reliance becomes routine rather than exception. So I believe that this is the most dangerous aspect where humans rely on agents and overtrust agents, and the agent can influence human decisions in real life. And the what's the most dangerous here is also going back to the attribution. The agent does not execute the final action, the human does, because the agent convinced them to do so. And this is why multi step human approvals in high risk transactions are extremely critical. This is where we talk about like eliminating that single point of failure.
Awesome. So, Sumit, take it away and close out with number 10.
Yeah, and it's kind of an extension of what Eva just said, right? The number 10 is about rogue agents. If agents are gonna go rogue, then you don't know where to go, right? In that system. One example that I always give or comes to my mind when I think about rogue agents or rogue AI solutions is the Air Canada example, right? It was an AI chatbot giving some misinformation to the consumer. So the consumer said that I'm traveling for a funeral. Am I, eligible to get some discounted pricing? And the AI chatbot said that yes, definitely, you can buy the full ticket now, and within 90 days, you can apply for a refund. But it was not there in Air Canada's policy. The consumer sued Air Canada, obviously, saying that this is what your AI chatbot told me. It was ruled that the company or the organization Air Canada is liable for the actions of the AI chatbot because they've incorporated that in their website. Similar thing for rogue agents, right? If there are rogue agents in your system and they do certain actions that either spread misinformation or do some things that could cause harm to others, you as an organization are liable. So it's really important to pay very close attention to how your agents are behaving and keep on monitoring them time to time to make sure that they are behaving as they should.
Sumit, you've actually really inspired us by sharing that real world example. So I'm going to go over to Eva. Eva, can you please share a scenario of a real world incident that directly informed one of the new top 10 risk? I want you to share this because I want to demonstrate to our audience that these are not just theoretical concerns.
Absolutely. So before I dive into an example, I'd like to invite all of the listeners to dive into the standard and go to Appendix D. That's where we have Agentic exploits an incident tracker that has a link to a repo that is being updated and refreshed. So you will be able to not just see recent examples from that already happened, but like if you check it in January, you'll be able to see more and so forth. So make sure you leverage that resource. So the example that I'll give you is actually going to illustrate three of these things that we talked about very, very clearly. So earlier this year, AI agent on a popular vibe coding platform that you all know, but I will not throw shade. It's in the news, but I don't want to talk about because this is just for education purposes. This vibe coding platform, the agent deleted a live production database containing real user and company data. Even though there was an active code freeze and no permission to make production changes. After deleting the database, the agent didn't stop and clearly say what went wrong. Instead, the agent made up information and gave the humans convincing, reassuring, and false responses, making it seem like everything was fine, so the problem couldn't be addressed and fixed, which hid the real damage from the human using it. So this is a very like high level overview of this, but essentially the three things behaviors that we see here is very clearly emerging as agent goal hijack, where the agent was executing destructive production actions outside the stated goals and constraints that it had. The human agent trust exploitation, the number 9 that we talked about, misleading the human with false system state evidence. And then finally, the rogue agent, which Sumit just described, which is continuing autonomous behavior after harm instead of stopping and escalating to the humans.
I like that you shared that scenario and you tied it to some of the top 10. And you can see that when these risks play out in real life, it could be a chaining of the risk and not necessarily one that gets to play out. So thank you so much for sharing that chain response, because then it gives us a real example, a real view into how this happens in real life. But a lot of what we've all spoken about so far has been more on the risk side. Sometimes you've sprinkled differences here and there, but I'd like us to basically, in those top 10, the ones you took, some of them that you can really pull up a defense that maybe you may not have shared, right? I'd like you to share a defense mechanism for any of the top 10 risks that you've explained. Eva, starting with you, please.
If I may, I'd like to take a different approach on this question. Instead of being prescriptive of specific mitigations, what I'd like to advise is, because this would largely depend on your business, on your business priorities as well as your architecture and what you're protecting and what are your top risks. So while the standard offers a lot of tactical mitigations for each one of these threats, I'd like to take a step back and just invite you, users that are here trying to implement this standard, first understand the risks and then identify some pilot workflows that you're either already deploying agents or that you're planning to deploy, and document everything. Document your business owner, your engineering owner, who's the security owner. If you don't have a security owner, that's you. I always advise people to take a programmatic approach to this. Instead of bottom up, let's think about the mitigations and defenses that we can do. Take a programmatic approach. See, where are you putting agents? What are the risks? And then from there, you can reverse engineer and go and work with the standards. That's why I say print it out and have it on your desk, because it's going to be your reference points as you go along. That's how I'd like to approach this. Like, instead of talking about specific mitigations, because there are so many that can vary and they can be very largely differing from an organization to organization, take a strategic approach, and just print out the standard, take ownership for your company, lead the change. We're now doing agents securely.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a couple of things there to what Eva said, right? This should be your starting point to educate yourself about, what are some of the common attacks out there, what are some of the common mitigations out there. But there is much more beyond this. Also, when I talk to a lot of customers and a lot of people about AI and agentic security, they tend to focus on agentic security only and forget about the overall organizational security that you have. If you are going to implement all the things that we said and you forgot about a basic network firewall, you're still going to get breached. You forget about an ACL, you're going to get breached. You forget about how to protect against DDoS, you're going to get breached, right? So you have to not just use these resources, but also make sure that you are covered on all fronts, be it on the perimeter side, on the application side, on your origin side, whatever different components you have in your application, you need to have a defense in depth strategy to protect yourself. We obviously refer to it as onion layers. You need to have tens of them, if not hundreds. So please, please, please make sure that you're using this as a starting point and not only implementing these things.
Thank you so much, Sumeet, for bringing that up, because again, AI is a shiny new thing we're talking about, but we need to go back to the basics, all right? What we've always known to do, and ensure that we do those things as well. But Eva, back to you. Hypothetically, a CISO or a security lead has just received the OWASP top 10 for agentic AI applications and agentic applications, and like you've said, they've printed it, they've put it on their desk. How do they translate the risk into prioritized phased action plan for the organization? What are you recommending should be the first step they take on Monday morning?
Wow, amazing. Love this question. So Monday morning first, right, we talked about have that printed on your desk. If you're a leader, if you're an executive, if you lead a team responsible for deploying or securing agents, lead the change and start on Monday. Send an email at an organization to basically say, we're adopting this as a standard for agentic AI. Then assign an owner to drive it, because a framework without accountability becomes shelfware. And we don't want that. As we continuously mention, this is kind of almost like a cheat sheet. And we have so many resources in the framework itself that help you with your day to day. But it's very important to assign an owner and then to start identifying what are your pilot workflows. And from there, use these to understand the risk profile of your organization, to understand all of these potential failure modes, and to most importantly, prioritize the risks that are relevant to you. This is not going to be you going across the risks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like not all of them may apply to you, and then some of them might be more important depending on your organization or industry. I actually am releasing, probably will have released by the time this is out, a video that gives people a 90-day roadmap that actually gives you a practical playbook on how to start implementing this framework and what.
Just put that in the show notes here.
Yes, I'll share it with you.
I know that we've spoken about a lot of this risk, right? We've spoke about critical risk like unexpected code execution, memory and context poisoning, rogue agents, and several interesting other threats. In your opinion, which of the top 10 is likely to go undetected for months? And why do you think that is so? How dangerous could that blind spot actually be for users of these agents?
I can take that. And I think, it goes back to one of my points I was making earlier when I was talking about, memory and context poisoning. When the attackers are poisoning the memory, it's not like an instant failure. It's not going to go down today, right? But the results of it that you see would get worse and worse as time passes, because it's kind of a slow poison. It's kind of a slow one that happens, right? And I was talking about bias being introduced in the overall responses from your agents. I mean, if you are feeding that information and corrupting the memory time and time again, then your agent is going to believe that it is true and it is going to serve accordingly to your end users. In my opinion, memory and context poisoning is something that would be definitely causing problems, not immediately, but down the line, and the problems would be significant.
I absolutely agree because it's very sneaky. It's one of those attacks that doesn't happen with a big bang. It happens slowly and it's hard to detect. And to reduce the risk of long term undetected memory poisoning, I believe that organizations should strictly control what agents are allowed to remember. Only high confidence and validated data should be written in long term memory, period. And all memory writes should include source attribution and timestamp so poison context can be traced and rolled back.
Awesome. So I was looking at the guidelines, right? And one of the listed guidelines for protecting users from tool misuse and exploitation, for example, is least privilege. Is there a difference between least agency and least privilege?
This is a really good question. I think least privilege limits what tools and permissions an agent has access to. This agency limits how much autonomy the agent has to act at all. And an agent can have minimal permissions but still be dangerous if it's allowed to act autonomously without oversight on some high critical transactions.
Yeah, like, I mean, just to continue there, right? I mean, your agent might have privilege to access a database, but have you given it that agency to go and delete that database or a table in a database? So that's how you can think about it.
That's interesting. So what you have access to and what you can do with it. That's great. So I know also that agents rely heavily on external components, like models, tools, rack data, like you mentioned. I think it was you, Eva, who took number 5 around insecure agent supply chain. And we know that this is a major concern, right? What practical steps can security teams take to maintain a secure inventory and integrity check across the agent's component dependencies?
Wow, another great question. I think security teams should maintain clear inventory of all agent components, first of all, like models, tools, plugin, RAG resources. They need to pin versions, verify integrity with hashes and signatures, revalidate dependencies at runtime. They should also implement rapid replication and kill switches for compromised components. Now, I did mention that earlier, but I will reiterate it. OWASP has a project called AI Bomb that helps teams build a structured inventory of AI components. Make sure you check it out. It will be linked in the show notes.
And I want to also add, we'll keep going back to the very fundamental principles. You can't protect what you don't know. And that's why I like that when you're responding with these responses, you're going back to knowing what you have, inventorying. And that's where the AI bomb comes in. So thank you so much for really throwing that in, Eva. Sumit, I want to ask around more with more context to what developers can do. Developers that are integrating a common tool like a database connector to an external API, for example, into their agent's workflow. What are the two most critical code level mistakes that they could make that they need to avoid?
There are so many, right? I mean, but the couple of things that come to my mind is what I like. First one is what I like to refer as, God mode tokens. You are giving your agent high level API keys or highly privileged API keys to perform all the function when they just need access to read. Going back to our previous database example, if they were only supposed to read the database or not just, and not even the whole database, just some functions within it, and you are giving them admin rights, then obviously you are digging your own grave, right? So don't make that mistake of, giving a single API key with highest privilege to perform the task. Yes, your task would be performed, but you would be attacked in, in a matter of days, if not hours, right? So don't make that mistake. The other mistake that I see is unvalidated chaining of tools, right? Because there are so many tools that are in picture here, and we spoke about things like cascading failures, right? Imagine if one tool is failing and you are not validating the output, which is treated as the input of the next tool, then it's going to cascade, right? We spoke about cascading failures, and that's how it happens. So you need to have guardrails in place to do the sanity checks at different points of your overall workflow to, help you secure yourself from cascading failures and other failures. So I think those are the two mistakes that are very common, which I see. And I think you were, moving to what kind of fix or what kind of um, guardrails we can put in place. So, when you are actually designing a system, you have to design the system with security in mind. The biggest mistake that I see people doing is they're using security in the AI era still the way they used to do in the previous era, meaning that they were just patching for vulnerabilities, right? You have to have the security built into the fabric when you're designing the system. So that's one advice that I always give to the people that I talk to when it comes to security. Think when you're designing the system, think about security first and not security last.
Let's just go on to something I like to call intent validation. I think that's something a term that we're also very used to. I want you to explain to our audience what intent validation is and how does it protect users from agent go hijack that you shared about earlier, Eva.
Yeah. Well, the intent validation checks essentially is checking if the agent's planned action matches its approved goal and policy before execution. It's effective for adaptive agents if implemented as a lightweight policy gate that validates outcomes. So at every reasoning steps. So to avoid lag validation should focus only on high impact actions, not every token or every thought. Like we need to balance as usual as traditional security, productivity and security. And I think that that's why it's so important for you to understand your ecosystem and your business needs first, because that's going to help you implement this standard. Like just lift and shift of this standard trying to implement in your organization is not going to work for you. You first have to have the understanding of your threat profile and your business workflows that are actually going to be using agents.
Interesting. So, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, same thoughts, right? I mean, whenever I hear specific terms like, intent validation, I try to, break it down into simple English meaning language. Intent validation, we're trying to validate if the agent is performing what it was supposed to perform, or is it drifting away from that? And if it is drifting away, how can we bring it back to the original goal that it was set to build for? Right? So that's how I like to look at it. And Eva obviously went a step further and explained about how and what we need to do when it comes to intent validation. So yeah, on the same page.
Awesome. So I've looked at the guide and I see that it really encourages that agents should pause or block execution on any unexpected goal shift, right? And then surface the deviation for review, possibly to a human, and then record it for audit. And I'm thinking to myself, would it be a better approach to incorporate systems that help agents distinguish between legitimate goal evolution and malicious goal drift? If this would not work, how do we ensure that this pause and block approach doesn't change the usefulness or doesn't stifle the usefulness and productivity level of AI agents?
So I think that this can be done by defining allowed goal boundaries and escalation rules. When uncertainty exists, pause and block rules should apply only to boundary crossing actions. As I mentioned in my previous question, right? Productivity and security have to be balanced. It's completely unrealistic for us to block and introduce like check at every single particular decision point. But I think that productivity needs to be preserved by allowing normal execution with approved scope and only slowing down when risk increases in decision making. I think a lot of these things, as we think about them, we can really bring them back to the traditional, good old vanilla security one on one, right? We used to have this thing as single point of failure. We used to have like in the legacy security, we for high risk actions, like you don't want to give can't remember what was the term for it, right? But you don't want to give just one admin the god mode rights. You want to split any high risk decisions with multiple people. It's very similar here, right? Like think of agents almost like as other people. So I think that that's how I think about it. So you can still apply the same cybersecurity practices from back in the day, but just apply them to agents, agent to agent, agent to human, human to agent. All of that applies. Just a little bit more complex now.
Yeah, and if you really think about it, as you think about agents as employees as well, that really just helps because the context just really hits in terms of how this applies to agents that you've actually been used to it applying for humans as well in the workplace. Yeah. So for a developer, right, using the top 10, at which specific stage of the agentic AI SDLC, right, is the risk such as tool misuse. At what stage can a developer prevent or have the biggest opportunity to prevent the most common risk like tool misuse?
I think I alluded to this point earlier as well. When you are designing an application, your design stage is very, very important. Again, going back to my previous point, and not just about tool misuse, for AI and agentic security overall, it has to start from the very beginning. The design phase itself needs to take into consideration what things could potentially go wrong, and those should be part of your design decisions that you make. Obviously, when it comes to implementation and testing, you need to make sure that design decisions that you made are actually being upheld in the actual application as well. And testing, when you do those testing, you have to test for even the remote test of edge cases and stuff. But it all starts with the design phase so that you don't end up in issues when you are in production.
I agree with you. But I mean, in both your experiences, right? What's the most surprising way that you have seen an agent misuse a legitimate tool? In your opinion as well, when such situations arise, who do you think should bear the brunt? Is it the developer who built that application or the user and organization?
It's a very deep question. I think that we can probably spend like the rest of the day talking about it. I'll try to briefly give an input and I'll pass it to Sumeet. Like I think that a common example, I don't know if it's surprising because at this point, I don't know if anything is surprising to me. Agent using legitimate admin or command line tools to perform destructive actions because the context implied urgency or like cleanup, right? We talked about that goal hijack. And so I believe that the developers and the organizations share a responsibility, right? I think that developers must design guardrails and permissions correctly. I'm going to go back and use the security scoping term here. We have to scope it down to the minimal privileges possible, both minimal privileges and minimum agency, while organizations must govern deployment, oversight, monitoring, right? I think that I wish that there was just one magic like mitigation or pill that I just give you and it's all fixed. But this is going to be where security community has to do some teamwork.
There are several examples. For example, if you're using an agent who could send emails on your behalf or who could delete certain things on your as an action, then there are going to be a lot of challenges if they go wrong, right? We spoke about the Air Canada example. There are several examples out there, and I think Eva mentioned about this, but I want to take it a step further. that it is a collective responsibility of everyone, including the end users. Sometimes we as consumers try to trick the LLMs to give us the output that we are looking for. And if you are going to do that in the long run, you are going to run into problem because that's how you are wanting to operate the system. You are trying to, even if you are not an malicious attacker, you're trying to trick the system in some way. So it's a really, really, a collective model. When cloud computing came out, we spoke about shared responsibility. From there, we moved to shared fate. With AI, it is more of a challenge for us as humanity than just a technological challenge. So everyone needs to be responsible here, be it the developers, be it the organizations, be it the end users and consumers.
Absolutely. I agree with both your takes on this. And I also want to really, have our audience really learn from your experience. What are the key metrics that security teams should track to measure progress and demonstrate that the mitigation efforts against the genetic top 10 risk are actually effective? Eva, what do you think about what those metrics could be?
So I have a very strong stance here, and which is I think that what you measure depends on your organization's risk profile. It'll be very naive of me to come here and give you some KPIs like you go and measure time to mitigate, or you go and measure how many agents are complying with X control, right? That would highly depend on your organization risk profile. So I would caution you against listening to anybody who gives you a canned advice on this one. While there is no single universal metric, I think effective programs focus on measuring whether the agent behavior is becoming more predictable, constrained, and really observable over time. So a practical, right? Because I want to keep it practical. While I know you probably don't like my response, I'd say pick the top three. Pick three, right? Even you don't have to pick all 10. What are the top three risks that you want to go after in 2026 and really just go at them? Pick those and then figure out what you're doing, what mitigation measures you're investing in. There's a ton listed in the standard. And then figure out how are you going to measure progress from today to whatever end of your quarter towards achieving good posture against mitigation. That would be essentially the framework by which you can build good KPIs. Simply like go from top to bottom. Don't start with the measurements. Start with the goal.
Yeah. And let's just, as we round off, go to speaking about rogue agents, right? I find this very interesting to when I read and think about it. Rogue agents have similar behavior patterns to insider threats. What tendencies are common to both, and how should organizations adapt their insider strategies to handle rogue AI agents?
You are very right in saying that there are a lot of commonalities between rogue agents and insider threats. If you are an insider threat, you probably have authorized access to certain things, but your intent is malicious overall. Same
Mhm.
for rogue agents. They might have proper access to do certain things. When they perform certain actions, they are looking for different outcomes than what the original developer wanted it to do. I mean, that is one commonality. Way you protect against it is for employees or insider threats. We look for some anomaly behaviors. Like if this person is logging in from UK, if they are based in US, or if they are logging in at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning, where the shift begins at 10 a.m. Right? We are looking at those kind of patterns there. You need to do simple kind of monitoring for agents. Are we seeing any drift, even if it's a minor drift? And are those cumulative enough to become a bigger problem down the line? So we need to have that intelligent analysis of the drift that is happening with the agents. And for that, we need to do that monitoring very religiously to come up with the patterns that could help us, make those decisions.
I really like that we keep going back to referring and talking about agents as those they are they can also be seen as employees. Yeah, because if you look at it from that perspective, it gives you some better context. right? And it also shows that, knowing what is normal is not just something we do for humans. We need to know what is also normal for agents, because that's only when you can know what's abnormal, and that's what you're monitoring to pick up on as cues for drifting. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm also just thinking, sitting down here and just thinking, right? There are many defenses that just rely on agentic or agent guardrails. Can you explain what a secure code level guardrail looks like for a common risk, like say, agent go hijack? Should it be a pre-processing filter? I mean, the guardrail, or a post-action validator, or both?
That's a really deep question if you think about it, right? When we talk about guardrails, we talk about different strategies that we put in place. Eva very beautifully mentioned about what agent goal hijack is, but a secure code level guardrail for example agent goal hijack, it functions as an independent firewall, in my opinion, right? And it sits between the agent's reasoning and its execution. So it's really important to make sure that when you are designing those guardrails, you are thinking about the whole architecture that you want to have in place, and not just thinking about individual components at one. You sure need to think about individual components and put guardrails around those, but the whole overall architecture. I think Eva, you beautifully drew the diagram that we have in the OWASP top 10 guide, where we talk about at what different levels there are going to be different challenges when it comes to the top 10 that we were talking about. So you need to look at it from a very holistic perspective, and how you can protect against it at a granular level, and then at a macro level as well, is what I think.
Absolutely. Eva, do you want to chime in?
I mean, I could not agree more. We live in an era where everybody has to think as an architect. And long gone are the days we can think about security and technical fixes in isolation. I believe that if there is one theme that emerged from this conversation, from all of these risks, is that everything is interconnected, cascading, and we have to think, we have to zoom out in every single decision that we make. Well, what is the small trickling impact that this change can have across the ecosystem?
Yeah. And I know that we have been discussing so far, and Eva, you have mentioned that there is no silver bullet to these things, but I also wanted to give our listeners something that they could run with. I mean, you're going to still share, your 90-day plan with us, but are there any emerging or existing open source tools or commercial solutions that you recommend practitioners start investigating right now to help with practical implementation of the investigations that you basically shared and outlined in the framework?
So the best thing what I can guide people to is ensure that the all of the resources that are published in the OWASP GitHub repo are vetted by industry professionals. They're usually backed by a lot of research. I would just recommend keep up. These repos are being updated. All of the we're working on more projects. There are multiple projects beyond just the Agentic apps top 10. So this is honestly the one tool that I'd put my name and to back just the OWASP resources that are community backed. Leverage the community resources as much as possible.
Absolutely. And just to close out, as we just round off finally, right? If either of you was asked to explain the OAP's agentic top 10 in an executive meeting using just 3 words, what would that be?
3 words. You are brutal, confidence. um, secure your agents.
I like it. Okay, so make sure to go.
Copy AI and say secure the ATM.
We just did something there, secure the ATM. Okay. Other people may not understand, right? So we can have it as an industry inside joke, secure the ATM. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, lady and gents, for coming on our show and just basically sharing your knowledge so nicely, so relatably, so tangibly as well, in a way that people can take on and just really improve the security posture, especially with agentic AI making its itself felt in terms of applications in the enterprise really strongly. Thank you so much for your time, and really big thank you and big shout out to OAPS as well, the whole community, for all of this incredible work they're doing to really just guide us as we go on with our work. So thank you so much for spending your time with us, and We really, really appreciate you listening to this. Go and follow Eva Benn, follow Sumeet on LinkedIn. We are going to put the links in the show notes and just consume what they're putting out. It's very valuable. Thank you so much, guys and lady, for your time.